Hello good people of YouTube and welcome to my hobby channel, and as I continue to model my foot knights and foot sergeants, today's video will be an unboxing of the Barons War foot sergeants from 1150 to 1320 from Wargames Atlantic. So the first thing I want to pick up on just before I unbox the foot sergeants is a question really. Maybe some of you know the answer. I don't as yet. I mean, obviously Wargames Atlantic have updated their logo. I'm just curious as to whether or not the Barons War 2nd edition has resulted in the Age of Chivalry miniatures being rebranded to fit the Barons War game. I know the Age of Chivalry was around before Barons War had really taken off. So yeah, just a bit curious as to whether or not that is a significant kind of branding change that brings these miniatures in line with the rules and the game for the Barons War. The other thing is, I can't remember what I paid for this. I have a feeling it was £25 for 30 multi-part hard plastic peasant levy. The box is slightly deeper, and for the same price you now get 24 multi-part hard plastic foot sergeants. That could just be a sign of the times. Obviously the cost of living is biting hard with everyone, all of us at home, and also these wonderful companies like Wargames Atlantic who produce all this stuff. Again, their production costs will have gone up. So that was just an observation really, nothing more. I'm not sure now if the Peasant Levy are going to be repackaged in a Barons War box, but maybe some of you out there know. I don't actually game or play Barons War. I might look into doing that. I just collect the miniatures so I can do videos like this and build my own eclectic medieval forces. Here's the foot sergeants. I bought these from my local hobby store. And wow, those are some seriously big shields. Yeah, of course I'm joking. Not very funny, I know. Just wanted to mention these though. I had opened the box and I did know they were there, which is why I have gone down this route. I just wanted to say a big shout out to Wargames Atlantic for making bases like this. They have a hole in the middle, and I suspect that will house a neodymium magnet quite nicely, which is great. So if you want to mount your figures on these bases, you want to magnetize the bases, you can pop one of the small neodymium magnets in there, get it glued into place. If you want a bigger magnet, although I don't know why you would, but if you did, obviously that's a handy place to get the drill bit to open that out a little. It's slightly beveled. I don't know which is the right way up or which is the wrong way up. I would imagine you're intended to glue your miniatures on there, but if you're looking to create some nice kind of textured bases, if you actually flip it upside down, that little bevel there is ideal just for catching and containing diorama paints or UV resins or whatever that you might want to use when you're basing. So I haven't actually seen these before. Again, this is why I'm drawing attention to them. I know that they get sold separately, I think, in the general accoutrements box. But this is the first time I've actually physically got my hands on some of these Wargames Atlantic round bases. And as I said, I suspect the hole in the middle there is a handy size for a magnet. So big shout out to Wargames Atlantic for that. That's pretty cool. And now we've got the sprues. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 5 sprues there. 4 of them contain body parts, arms, heads and weapons, and this one contains pole arms and spears by the look of it. Have a quick look at this. I'm not going to dwell on it for too long, but you can see various arms there. I think they're all labelled and numbered by the look of it, which is good, certainly for the two-handed weapons, and it looks like they've been labelled as well when the spear is being held in both hands. So there's some pole arms or halberds or whatever up there. Looks like there's more spears than pole arms. And who's to say that wasn't actually the case in history? I don't know, but that's interesting. I would imagine that a spear is much easier and cheaper to produce, and it's probably easier to use as well. So it wouldn't surprise me if there was a predominance of that weapon on the battlefield during medieval times. And then there are 4 of these sprues, which contain 6 legs and 8 torsos, so there's a bit of variety there. I've already spotted some exciting things, but I'll start with the heads. Again, nice variety of heads, different helmets there. Some are familiar. I've seen these, I think, in the peasant levy box. And again, the back of the heads and the necks there, you can see the necks will be incorporated into the body. Head has the socket or the recess that takes the neck, and that's the same for all of them. In fact, there's quite a few heads there, and there's more heads here without headgear. Some of these look like peasant levy heads, and then there's heads with helmets on there, and lots of them. So yeah, quick count, there's something like 17 or 18 heads. As I said, that's a very quick count. So if we just take a look at the legs, poses that are similar to and reminiscent of the peasant levy, but obviously the clothing is slightly different. We have thicker jerkins, chainmail and quilted leather, but they're really nice. I'm looking forward to building a couple of these. And then of course the 8 torsos. There are some here which appear to have shield arms on, 3 there. So there are 3 with shield arms. And then there are 4 with no arms on at all. So my guess there is that these are for your foot sergeants with the halberds and two-handed weapons. Shields are incorporated on the sprue. And then we've got some interesting arms here as well, which are for crossbows. So that's a nice touch. There's a blanket roll there, and then little things dotted around like money pouches or purses, swords that are in their scabbard, and then we've got some weapon arms there, and some other bits and pieces. There's a pointing hand, and I wonder if that arm there with a spear is either to make a standard bearer from, or perhaps a personal guard, personal bodyguard perhaps. And I've just spotted there's a trumpet or a horn to make a musician. Painted examples on the box and the box art, which are probably designed to help you or guide you with the assembly of the miniatures, but no actual instructions. I'm going to build a foot sergeant with a crossbow, and here we've got a crossbow labelled A1 and a crossbow labelled B1. They've both got both hands on the crossbow. There are corresponding arms up here, B2 and A2. As I said, no instructions, but you can see from the fabric on the sleeve designs why it's been necessary to label these, just to make sure that you don't mix them up. So we've got a C1 there with a C2 next to it. Interestingly, we've also got this arm here, which seems to be a duplicate of the C2. So you've got C1 and C2 there, and then this arm on its own, which has the similar sleeve to the A1 crossbow. But I've checked through this sprue and I cannot for the life of me find another crossbow with the plain fabric on the sleeve that would go with that particular piece there. Other thing that's worth pointing out before we start building, obviously, is you've got the different fabric designs on the sleeves there. When it comes to things like torsos and legs, again, there's going to be different fabric designs. So we've got some plain fabric there, some quilted fabric on these, quilted fabric there, plain fabric on these. So you just need to be mindful of the arms, legs and torsos that you're using when assembling these models, particularly because, as I've already mentioned, there are no instructions. So I'll snip off the parts that I need and then come back when I've cleaned them up. Collected my bits and got a bit carried away. I'm going to make 5 different models very quickly. A couple of crossbows, a couple of foot sergeants in interesting or characterful poses, and then a foot sergeant with a halberd. One thing I've noticed whilst snipping the bits from the sprue is that there's lots of variety, but there's also lots of opportunity to make some intelligent choices when you're cutting the bits out that you need. I found it necessary to take a good hard look at things like whether or not there was some chainmail under the tunics, whether or not the torsos had chainmail on them, and the fact that you might want to carry that through the model. Some arms have short chainmail sleeves on them, others have quilted or padded fabric, and other arms are just plain, no particular design on. So you've got a lot to choose from, but you also need to make some careful choices when you're selecting the bits that you want to glue together so that the finished model actually makes sense. Why would someone have chainmail sleeves if there's no chainmail showing on the rest of the miniature? So little details like that will help you build a model that makes more sense to the eye when it's finished. So there's the torso. And that depicts a crossbow being loaded. I'll put some glue on the pouch so that we've got a bond, not just with the shoulder, but to the hip as well. Some glue on the neck. And then I've got this head with a kettle helmet. That I can place on there. Again, with the design of the neck and the head on these miniatures, you're limited to being able to rotate the head slightly, but that's about it. You can always adjust that if you want. If you want to get the green stuff and the super glue out and start converting, you can do. Maybe that's something I'll do in a separate video, but there is one foot sergeant with crossbow in a quilted jacket. And there is a crossbowman firing. And then based on the position of the arm on the other model and the placement of the quiver, I'll put a little bit of glue on there and give him a pouch of crossbow bolts in roughly the same place. But there is a foot sergeant with halberd. There are several shields that are slightly different shapes, but they all have the same sort of design on the back, and there's a little hole there in which the pin on the hand, back of the hand, will fit. So we'll get some glue on that, little on the arm. Position the shield across the back of the hand and make sure that the other straps there line up with the arm as well, so that that's being held in a convincing and natural position. There, and that makes a lovely pose. And then just to finish this model off, I'm going to slip a sword in its scabbard onto the belt there. So I'll get some glue under there and make sure that's the way round that I want it. And just slide it in there to complete the picture. There. I'm reaching the end of this video now. It's taken me a couple of weeks, I think, to actually film it. But before I do the scale lineup, I just wanted to show you the 5 models that I've built using parts from the Wargames Atlantic Barons War Foot Sergeants. I think these are great models. There's lots of scope. There's loads of different component parts that get you a really nice aesthetic with these models. You can build forces that look like Normans right the way through to mid to late medieval, I guess, with the kettle helmets and stuff. Plenty of scope there. I think some of the bodies, particularly the one in the middle there, they're quite reminiscent of the Wargames Atlantic Peasant Levy. I have no doubt that there are hundreds of kit bashing opportunities that you can have between the Foot Sergeants, the Peasant Levy, maybe even the classic Fantasy Guard and Fantasy Villagers that Wargames Atlantic produce. Okay, so the first miniature on the left is not medieval. I know this is a Wargames Foundry English Civil War, but it's representative of the size and scale across their range, and I just happen to have it to hand. So that's a Foundry 25-28mm historical miniature there on the left-hand side. And you can see that next to one of the Wargames Atlantic Foot Sergeants that I've just built. And then moving along, we've got a metal claymore castings, and you can see there, scale wise, that's a pretty good fit with the Wargames Atlantic Foot Sergeant there. We move along a bit further, we've got this Victrix. Now I can't remember if it's a Foot Sergeant or a Foot Knight, but both of those are comparable in size. So I've just picked one to represent the Victrix model there. Now it actually looks bigger lined up like this in front of the camera than it does to my eye when I'm looking at them on the desk. So what I'm going to do is just pull out a little so that you can see what I mean. I think that gives a better idea. I know Victrix sometimes have a reputation for being on the tall side, and when you zoom in here it certainly looks like it's a slightly larger scale, but from further away the differences are not so obvious or apparent. And I, for one, am definitely going to be mixing my Victrix Foot Sergeants and Foot Knights with Foot Sergeants and Foot Knights from all the other manufacturers that I've featured in all of my videos. So as I said, I think that's a little deceiving there. And in fact, to demonstrate the point, I've just swapped out with a different Victrix miniature there. Again, looks a little chunkier, looks a little bigger than the Wargames Atlantic. And from this close-up, you might think, yeah, that's a little on the large side. But pulling out again, you'll see it's a good fit. In the centre here, we have a Wargames Atlantic Barons War Foot Knight. My initial thoughts when I first opened the Foot Knights many months ago was that they were a little on the small side, comparing them with, you know, sort of Perry miniatures and Warlord miniatures, they just seem to be a little bit too small. But here, again, they look fine. I think all of these models work really well together. Moving along, we've got another Wargames Atlantic foot sergeant there with the halberd or poleaxe, whatever you want to call it, and next to that there's a Fireforge foot knight. And perhaps from down here it looks a little bit large again, a little bit tall, a bit like the Victrix. But if we pull away and move out, you can see that really it's not that bad. And I've just paused the video to drop in a archer. Again, this might be a foot sergeant or a medieval crossbowman from Fireforge, just to show how that compares size and scale wise with the Baron's War foot sergeant from Wargames Atlantic. Now, a number of people have complained in the past that I am comparing modern plastic miniatures with old 28mm and 25mm pre-slaughter models, as though I'm committing some kind of a crime. I do this because people ask me to do this. They want to see this, and I also have pre-slaughter medieval miniatures in my collection. As far as I'm concerned, these miniatures are part of our wargaming heritage. If they still fit, if they still work with some of these modern plastics, then I want them in my units and I want them on my wargaming table. So moving along, next we have I think this is a human heavy infantry from Oathmark, and he's standing next to the last of the medieval foot sergeants that I've just built from Wargames Atlantic, from their Baron's War box. I really love this model with the helmet under the arm and pointing. I think that's, again, it's a wonderful pose, lots of character. And you can see him here standing next to a 100 Years' War Agincourt foot knight from Perry Miniatures. And now I'm doing a lineup with some of the miniatures that I've got on slot bases. So extreme left here we've got Town Guard from Wargames Atlantic, next to a Norman looking crossbowman there, and that's from the foot sergeant's box that I've just built. In between that foot sergeant and the other foot sergeant on the extreme right with a crossbow, I've got War of the Roses pikeman, I think, from Perry Miniatures. We've got a Warlord Renaissance Landsknecht pikeman there. Next to the crossbowman here, we've got one of the old classic Bretonian archers, originally sculpted by the Perrys and released in plastic. Then I've got another Wargames Atlantic Conquistador here, this model armed with a crossbow. Then we've got the Wargames Atlantic foot sergeant with a halberd next to a Bretonian peasant archer. We've got another Wargames Atlantic foot sergeant next to two metal Warhammer Empire handgunners. The one on the right hand side is an Estalian, and he is next to the last build that I did from the box of Wargames Atlantic foot sergeants, and I've got him next to a retainer there, which is a Citadel miniature that I've had since the mid to late 1980s, and a Battle Lord of some description there that I've also used in scale lineups in previous videos. Thanks ever so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please smash that like button. Please subscribe for more videos like this. If you'd like to leave a comment, please do, but keep those comments kind and respectful. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.